Governor Wes Moore getting ready to hold a press conference on the work that was done to the Key Bridge in Baltimore.
This comes as crews began removing the ship that caused the crash from the river yesterday. Let's listen in.
The Key Bridge collapse. And I remember standing here at this very spot. I remember looking over at the Patapsco River, and I remember seeing a container ship that is the length of 3 football fields. A container ship that is the weight of the Washington Monument, a container ship that, when people understand the scale of these containers, that each of those containers weighed about 1.5 to 2.5 tons. And I remember seeing the Dali stuck in the Patapsco River that had 4,000 of those container ships on it, and also with thousands of tons of steel from the Key Bridge sitting on top of it as well. That morning, we all experienced one of the worst tragedies our state has seen in recent history. We saw where a major artery of one of our country's busiest ports had collapsed, something that tens of thousands of workers relied on every single day to get to work, that tons of mangled steel sat at the bottom of the Patapsco River, where thousands of workers who relied on this port, who rely on this bridge, saw their place of work close. And we also knew that that morning, we realized that 6 people who were working on the bridge, 6 Marylanders, were now unaccounted for. That morning, we looked over there, and what we saw was, frankly, more questions than answers. What we saw was more unknowns than knowns. But now, 8 weeks later, we're standing. We're standing in the same spot. In the same spot where you can look over the Patapsco River, and we can see that not only have we removed thousands of tons of steel, but also that enormous container ship that we discussed is both refloated and cleared. A vessel that was omnipresent and looming on this horizon for weeks is now gone, and it's docked at the port. People said that it could take months to get to this point. This team got it done in a matter of weeks. Because this was an unprecedented tragedy, we're proud of the fact that this team has presented an unprecedented response. We saw unprecedented coordination across all parts of Unified Command. We saw unprecedented commitment from our first responders and our divers and our translators and our solvers. We saw unprecedented dedication from our private sector friends who pledged to not only not lay off their workers, but also pledged that they would return their business to Baltimore as soon as possible. We saw unprecedented partnership from our friends across all sectors of society, from the halls of the State House to mom and pop lunch counters over in Dundalk and over in Turner Station. We said that we would center our response on 4 directives: bring closure and comfort to the families who lost loved ones, to clear the full federal channel and fully reopen the Port of Baltimore to vessel traffic, to support everyone affected by this crisis, from our workers to our businesses to our families, and to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge. So we still have work to do. But here's what we can say. We've recovered all 6 victims and brought them home to their families. We've lifted over 10,000 tons of steel out of the water and refloated the Dali with no major injuries. What we said from the start, we lost 6 Marylanders that morning. We were committed to not losing any more. Conducting all these operations with no major injuries. We've successfully partnered with leaders on both sides of the aisle in the State House to launch 4 different state programs to help workers and to help businesses. And I want to give a special shout out to the Department of Labor. I want to give a special shout out to the city of Baltimore and Baltimore County, because at a time when people were anticipating there could be massive job loss because of an unprecedented crisis, because of an unprecedented tragedy, these programs were stood up in weeks to support workers. This is an example of what it looks like when government is coordinated and when government is working. And despite high projections of loss, thankfully, because of the coordination, we did not see that. And
well, right there was Governor Wes Moore giving an update on the Key Bridge collapse. He said the day this all happened, it was one of the worst tragedies Maryland has seen in recent history. But 8 weeks later, we can see that they've removed tens of thousands of tons of steel, and that container ship is cleared and now docked at the port.
Yeah, and he said people thought that it could take months to get this done. He said his team got it done in just weeks. Again, 8 weeks to move that ship and have it docked now at the port. He also said that it was very important for him and other officials to give the families to closure. We're talking 6 people who went missing. And again, those victims all recovered during this time frame as well. Again, we'll have more on this press conference coming up on DC News Now this morning, but for now,